I was cutting across the sparkling blue water of my own lake, sun high, breeze in my hair, engine roaring beneath me. It was the kind of freedom people only dream about. The kind of moment that makes all the sacrifices worth it, the late nights, the overtime, the saving and planning for years just to afford this slice of paradise. I had always wanted a house with a lake, a peaceful place to unwind, and the ability to ride my jet ski whenever I wanted. Finally, that dream had come true. The water was cool, the air smelled fresh and piney, and every sound of the jet ski's engine echoing across the water made my smile wider. Until I saw the flashing red and blue lights blinking at the shore. My heart skipped a beat. I let go of the throttle, the engine easing into a soft purr as I turned the ski back toward my dock. There were 2 sheriff's deputies standing by the water, and next to them, arms folded tight and a look of pure satisfaction on her face, was Karen. Not just any Karen. The Karen. The self-proclaimed queen of our homeowners association, with a permanent scowl, a Bluetooth headset that she never actually used, and a printed copy of the HOA handbook that she carried around like a sacred scroll. If something was fun, she probably hated it. And now she was here, with cops. For what? For me riding a jet ski on my own lake? At first, I thought maybe there'd been a noise complaint, or maybe a misunderstanding. I stepped off the jet ski and tied it to the dock, trying to keep things calm. "Afternoon, officers," I said, wiping water from my hands. One of the deputies nodded, but the other gestured toward Karen. "This woman says you're violating HOA regulations by operating a motorized vehicle on this lake." I blinked. "Motorized vehicle? You mean my jet ski?" "Yes," Karen cut in, her tone sharp and superior. "The rules clearly state that no motorized watercraft are allowed. That lake is part of our community property. You're disturbing the neighborhood and violating multiple safety codes." I looked at her, then back at the officers. "With all due respect, that's not community property. That lake is literally behind my house. It came with my lot. I bought it." Karen rolled her eyes. "You bought the house. The lake is part of the shared land. It falls under HOA regulation." I opened my mouth to argue, but the deputy spoke again. "Do you have any documentation that shows the lake belongs to you?" "I mean, yeah. I think I do. It's in the deed." I remember my lawyer pointing it out. "We'd have to see that before making any decisions," he said. Karen smirked, like she thought she'd already won. "Don't worry, officers. I've already contacted the HOA board. He's going to be fined heavily. Possibly even referred to the county. He's creating a disturbance and putting others at risk." I wanted to laugh. A disturbance? There wasn't a single boat on the water. No one was swimming, no kids playing nearby, nothing but trees, birds, and me. "Look," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. But this lake came with my property. The whole reason I bought this place was to have private lake access. I was told by my realtor and my attorney that I had full usage rights. I'm not trying to break any laws here." Karen scoffed. "Then prove it. Otherwise, I'll have the board vote to suspend your access to all community features, including the walking trails and the clubhouse." That's when I remembered the weird conversation I'd had with my attorney right before closing. He'd flagged a paragraph on the last page of the deed and said something about it being unique. Something about the lake. At the time, I was more focused on signing paperwork than digging into the details. But now, with Karen trying to drag me into HOA purgatory and the police looking for answers, I knew I had to find that paper. "All right," I said. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back." Karen raised her voice as I jogged up the lawn. "You can't just walk away from this. You're going to be fined. This is serious." I ignored her and kept moving. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the absurdity of it all. Cops. Over a jet ski. On my own lake. Inside the house, I raced to my home office and flung open the drawer where I kept all the home documents. Pages and folders flew across the desk as I searched for the right one. I finally found it, my property deed, folded neatly in a plastic cover. I flipped to the last page and there it was, right where my attorney had pointed. Owner is granted exclusive recreational usage of adjacent water body. This right supersedes any HOA or community-imposed limitations, provided county ordinances are not violated. Boom. I sprinted back outside with the paper in hand, holding it like a declaration of independence. Karen was still talking, pointing at my dock and rambling about, rules are rules. I ignored her and walked straight up to the deputy. Here, I said, out of breath. This is my deed. Look at paragraph 3, last page. The officer took the paper and read it carefully. Karen tried to peek over his shoulder but the other deputy gently held her back. This states that he has exclusive rights to the lake, the officer said. Karen's jaw dropped. That has to be fake. That can't be legal. Ma'am, the deputy said calmly, if this document is valid, and it appears to be, then you have no authority to enforce HOA rules on this lake. I couldn't help but grin. Karen turned bright red. She pointed a trembling finger at me. This isn't over. You think you're smart, but I'll find a way. I raised the deed like a trophy. Good luck with that. Because I did my homework. Did you? The officers thanked me for my cooperation and walked back to their cruiser. Karen stormed off in the opposite direction, muttering something about board meetings and emergency votes. I looked out at the lake, the water still rippling from my last ride. Then I turned back to my jet ski, untied it from the dock, and revved the engine once more. Freedom never sounded so sweet. Back inside my house, I sat down at the kitchen table, the deed still in my hands, the adrenaline slowly wearing off. I stared at that one line again and again, almost in disbelief at how something so small on paper could carry so much power in real life. It was almost poetic. Karen had tried to use her authority to control me, to scare me, to embarrass me in front of law enforcement and neighbors, but she hadn't counted on the fine print. And that fine print had just saved me. The next morning, I woke up to a folded notice taped to my front door. HOA letterhead, bold red letters across the top, notice of community violation, pending fine. I didn't even flinch. I poured my coffee, took the letter inside, and read every word. It was full of exaggerated claims, noise disturbance, unauthorized use of shared amenities, reckless behavior near community access points, and my personal favorite, endangering community wildlife. They were grasping at straws, throwing whatever buzzwords they could think of in an attempt to justify their overreach. But here's the catch, they never once quoted a legal statute, county code, or even an HOA bylaw. Just vague language and empty threats. So I did exactly what I knew would push their buttons. I took a picture of the letter, added a caption that read, "They're mad I enjoyed my own lake. Here's their case," and posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group. I attached the page of the deed too, with the lake rights paragraph highlighted in bright yellow. I figured a few people would see it. Maybe someone would comment. I had no idea it would explode. Within an hour, my phone was lighting up with likes, shares, laughing emojis, and comments like, "Wait, what? We're not allowed to use the lake." Karen told me I had to take my canoe down because it blocked the natural view. She said jet skis were illegal because of state laws. She lied. How do I find out what my deed says? Apparently, I wasn't the only one Karen had tried to intimidate. Over the years, she'd been telling neighbors all sorts of half-truths, pretending HOA rules overruled property ownership, banning harmless stuff like hammocks and garden statues, even threatening one family with legal action because their kid's swing set was too colorful. But this was the first time someone had challenged her, and won. I started getting private messages from neighbors asking if I'd be willing to help them review their deeds. I'm no lawyer, but I had enough experience with contracts to know how to spot important clauses. One by one, people started digging up their paperwork and finding similar rights. Not everyone had full lake access like I did, but several homes along the water did. Turns out, when the land was originally parceled and sold, some properties came with extended water rights that were never technically transferred to the HOA. They just assumed control. Karen had relied on that assumption for years. But now, that illusion was falling apart. 2 days later, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find Karen standing there, flanked by 2 members of the HOA board, Mr. Holloway, a retired accountant with nervous energy, and Lisa, a middle-aged woman who always acted like HOA meetings were top-secret government missions. Karen didn't even say hello. She just launched into her speech. "We need to discuss your behavior and recent posts online. You've created division in the neighborhood and are misrepresenting the role of the HOA." "Come on in," I said, stepping aside. I wanted them to say it all again, right to my face. Once they sat down, Karen took out a stack of printed screenshots, my Facebook post, the comments, someone else's post about how Karen forced them to take down a bird feeder. "This kind of misinformation damages our authority," she said sharply. "We can't have every homeowner thinking they're above the rules." I stayed calm. I'm not above anything. I just followed the law. The deed is clear. Mr. Holloway adjusted his glasses and mumbled, "Well, it's not that simple. The HOA has established policies, and policies don't override property rights," I cut in. "Look, I'm not trying to be a troublemaker. But this whole thing started because Karen called the cops on me for riding a jet ski on my lake. That's not just overreach, that's harassment." Karen's face tightened. "You were disturbing the peace. There was no one around. No swimmers, no wildlife, no boats. Just you, standing there with binoculars." Lisa spoke up for the first time. "We're considering a formal board meeting to address these issues. You'll be expected to attend." "Gladly," I said. "But just so we're clear, I've already contacted a real estate attorney. And I'm not the only one. There are at least 5 homeowners on this lake with similar clauses in their deeds. You might want to get your own legal team before trying to enforce anything." That seemed to catch them off guard. Karen stood up abruptly. "This isn't the end of it." "No," I said calmly. "It's just the beginning of accountability." After they left, I went back to the neighborhood group and made another post. This time, I included a simple message: don't be afraid to read what you signed. Just because someone says they're in charge doesn't mean they are. That post got even more attention. One neighbor offered to host a community meetup where we could discuss what our rights actually were, outside of the HOA's version. People were tired of being bullied. For the first time, we were standing up, together. And it all started because I refused to back down over a jet ski ride. The weekend came faster than expected, and with it came something I never thought I'd see in this neighborhood: people actually enjoying the lake. Not just looking at it from behind their patios, but really using it. That Saturday morning, I walked out to my dock with a cup of coffee and stopped in my tracks. There were kids splashing near the shore. 2 neighbors had set up fishing chairs on a small wooden platform near their backyard, and just beyond them, one of my neighbors, Paul, was slowly cruising across the lake in a small motorized dinghy. I couldn't help but smile. Word had clearly gotten out. And not only that, people weren't scared anymore. They weren't asking Karen for permission. They weren't checking the HOA binder before stepping outside. They were living like they actually owned their property. I got onto my jet ski and idled out into the lake, giving Paul a wave as I passed him. He grinned back and shouted, "Hope I don't get arrested." We both laughed. A few minutes later, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the far end of the lake, arms crossed, binoculars glued to her face. Karen. Watching. Scowling. Furious. But she didn't say a word. Not this time. She just stood there, probably boiling inside, knowing there was nothing she could do. The deed had spoken louder than her clipboard ever could. Still, I knew Karen wouldn't give up easily. And I was right. On Monday, I received an official notice via email that the HOA was scheduling an emergency compliance meeting to review unauthorized water activity within community boundaries. It was clearly targeted. The language was vague, but the intent was obvious. The email also noted that failure to attend may result in immediate disciplinary measures including, but not limited to, suspension of community privileges. I didn't even blink. I hit reply all and sent a short message, "I'll be there," along with my legal counsel. And the original deed. Within minutes, I received 5 separate emails from other neighbors thanking me for standing my ground and asking if they could attend too. Apparently, Karen had used these emergency meetings before, always private, always intimidating. But this time, she was going to have an audience. When the day of the meeting arrived, the small clubhouse was packed. I expected maybe a dozen people, but there were more than 30. Some brought their own copies of their deeds. Others brought notebooks, ready to take notes. There were people I'd never even met before, quiet neighbors from down the street who just wanted answers. Karen walked in wearing a bright red blazer, clipboard in hand, looking like she was ready to lead a military tribunal. She sat at the head of the long conference table, flanked by her loyal board members. The energy in the room shifted immediately, tension, frustration, even a little fear, but also something new, resistance. "Let's begin," Karen said coldly. "We've had a number of serious breaches of community rules regarding lake usage. Specifically, the use of motorized watercraft, which is strictly prohibited according to the HOA guidelines." She paused, looked around the room dramatically, then narrowed her eyes in my direction. "Some residents have spread misinformation that threatens the harmony and safety of our neighborhood." That was my cue. I stood up and walked to the front of the room, holding a large folder. "With all due respect, Karen, the only thing threatening harmony is you pretending to have authority over something you don't. This lake was never HOA property. The original deeds of at least 6 homes explicitly state individual recreational rights to the lake, superseding HOA rules. This isn't misinformation, it's a matter of legal record." I opened the folder and pulled out 6 copies of different deeds, each one with the same language highlighted in yellow. I placed them on the table. "These are real. Verified by legal counsel. Would you like to dispute them?" Karen didn't even touch the papers. Even if those clauses exist, the HOA still governs how shared spaces are used for safety and consistency. "But it's not a shared space," I said firmly. "The deeds prove it. You're trying to enforce rules on land you don't control." One of the neighbors in the back, a man named Greg, stood up. "She told me last year I couldn't put a rowboat in because of noise pollution. But I have this same clause in my deed." She lied. A woman added, "She told us we couldn't install a small dock because it would interfere with community aesthetics. We've been afraid to even ask questions." The room began buzzing with frustrated voices, people trading stories of intimidation, misinformation, even threats of fines over ridiculous things like wind chimes or flower colors. Karen banged her gavel. "Order. This meeting is not about personal grievances." "Actually," I said calmly, "it's exactly about that. Because you've built your power on the assumption that no one would challenge you. But now we are. And we've got the documents to back us up." At that point, one of the board members, Lisa, the woman who had previously backed Karen, stood up slowly. "I didn't know about the deed clauses. I was told the HOA had full control over the lake." You were told wrong, I said. And the board deserves to know the truth, just like everyone else here. Lisa looked at Karen, then turned back to me. Maybe it's time we review the HOA's jurisdiction. Maybe we've gone too far. Karen turned red, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know what to say. For the first time, her grip on the room was slipping. She looked around and realized she wasn't being feared anymore, she was being questioned. After a few seconds of dead silence, she picked up her clipboard and said stiffly, "This meeting is adjourned. We'll consult with legal counsel." She stormed out. The room erupted in quiet cheers and relieved laughter. Neighbors started chatting openly, exchanging contact information, offering to help each other review paperwork. What had started as a simple lake ride had become something bigger, a spark that revealed years of control and manipulation. And now, people were wide awake. Later that evening, I returned to the lake, fired up my jet ski, and rode across the water under the setting sun. The reflection shimmered like gold, and in the distance, I saw Paul and another neighbor floating in their boats. We waved. No binoculars. No clipboards. No threats. Just peace. The next few weeks felt like a complete transformation. The neighborhood had never been this alive. What used to be a quiet, tense row of lake houses suddenly turned into a place where people actually lived. You could hear laughter from the docks, see kids fishing with their parents, teens paddling kayaks, and on weekends, someone was always out on the water, either cruising slowly in a boat or like me, tearing across the lake on a jet ski with the wind in my face. It was everything a lakeside community should be. But more than that, it was a win for common sense. Karen, on the other hand, had practically vanished. She stopped walking her usual patrol route. The clipboard sightings ceased. And her threatening HOA emails? Radio silence. Word quietly spread that after the last meeting, several board members had confronted her privately. Some even demanded a vote to reduce her authority or remove her altogether. Her empire, built on silence and fear, was crumbling. A few neighbors told me she was furious behind closed doors, threatening lawsuits, and calling her brother-in-law, who was supposedly a lawyer, but even he must have told her the truth. She had no legal ground to stand on. Property deeds trumped HOA preferences. Rights written in black and white overruled opinions printed in HOA newsletters. One Saturday morning, I was refueling the jet ski when an older gentleman I hadn't spoken to before came strolling over from next door. He introduced himself as James. "Heard you stirred things up," he said with a chuckle. "About time someone did." I smiled. Didn't mean to start a revolution. Just wanted to ride my jet ski. He nodded, leaning on the railing. "When we moved here 8 years ago, we were excited about the lake too. But Karen showed up with the rulebook the first week. Told me the lake wasn't really mine, that I could look at it, maybe fish if I asked, but no boats, no fun. Scared my wife so bad she never set foot on that dock again." I felt a wave of frustration for him. "You ever check your deed?" "Didn't even think to. Back then, we just believed whatever the board told us. Now, I'm thinking about buying a kayak." I laughed and told him he should. "And if Karen says anything," I added, "send her to me." That same weekend, we had an unofficial neighborhood get-together by the lake. No flyers. No permission. Just people showing up with coolers, portable grills, lawn chairs, and music. It felt like a real community, not a tightly monitored gated prison. The best part? No one had to ask for it. It was ours, and we finally knew it. Somewhere during the gathering, someone suggested creating a lakefront rights group, not as a rebellion, but to help other homeowners understand their actual property rights, especially newcomers who might be too scared to challenge the HOA. The idea took off. Within days, we had a simple WhatsApp group, and a neighbor named Alicia, who worked as a paralegal, offered to create templates for public records requests and help people interpret their deeds. A movement had been born, not aggressive, not angry, just smart and prepared. Karen must have noticed the shift, because one morning a few weeks later, I saw her walking by, no clipboard, no sunglasses, no Bluetooth headset. She walked slower, more cautiously, like someone who knew they'd lost control. She didn't say anything, just looked at the water and then at me before walking on. That look? That was the real win. Not because I wanted to see her defeated, but because it meant the fear was gone. She knew she couldn't push people around anymore. She knew the truth was out. And the truth had spread like wildfire. One afternoon, I was at the local store when I overheard two people in the hardware aisle talking about that lake guy who proved the HOA wrong. One of them turned and recognized me. "Hey, you're the jet ski guy, right?" I chuckled. "Yeah, I guess that's me." "Dude, legend. I've got family in another community dealing with the same HOA garbage." I showed them your story, they're checking their deeds now. That was the moment it really hit me. What started as a simple confrontation, just me standing up for my right to enjoy the lake I paid for, had become bigger. A symbol of standing up for what's right. Not through rage, not with lawsuits and shouting matches, but by using facts, documents, and a calm refusal to be bullied. Months passed, and life at the lake settled into a new normal. People came and went freely. The HOA board quietly amended its language around lake usage, admitting in small print that some homeowners retained individual rights and that rules may vary depending on property deed. It was a quiet surrender, but a surrender all the same. They didn't apologize. They didn't thank anyone. But they backed off, and that was enough. One day, I got a knock at my door. It was Lisa, one of the HOA board members who had originally backed Karen. She looked nervous. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I invited her in. She told me the board had voted to restructure some of its internal procedures. "Honestly," she said, "you did us a favor. We got lazy. We trusted Karen too much. You made us remember that we work for the community, not the other way around." That stuck with me. Because that's the problem with power, when no one questions it, it grows roots in all the wrong places. But when one person challenges it, it can shake the whole system until it resets. That night, I took one last ride across the lake. The sun was setting, casting golden streaks across the water. The engine purred beneath me, smooth and steady. As I skimmed across the surface, I saw James on his new kayak, kids building a raft near the shore, and a young couple floating on an inflatable swan, laughing like life had no weight. That's what it was all for. That's what the fight was about. Not just a jet ski. Not just one lake. But the simple idea that when something is yours, no one has the right to take it from you, not with a clipboard, not with threats, and certainly not with a fake rulebook. Because all it took was one line in a forgotten document to silence all the noise. One sentence to end years of intimidation. One paragraph to restore freedom. And now, every time I hear that engine roar and see the water ripple out in perfect circles, I smile, knowing that I didn't just take back my lake. I helped take back the whole neighborhood.